If you would, grab a songbook out and turn to number 580. I actually want you to see those words in front of you right now. In this hymn book, that's hymn number 580 is 10,000 Angels. I love hearing the stories of where the hymns come from. Where do we get those hymns, and what circumstances were they written under? I listened to Danny's lesson on It Is Well, and that one's always a powerful song to hear and just to understand the story behind that. It's just a touching thing. But I'll tell you, this song, number 580, you'll see the name Ray Overholt as the one who composed the lyrics and actually the melody to this as well. He was a songwriter, he was a musician. But I'll tell you about his life. At the time that he wrote this song, he was an absolute mess. He drank all the time. He cussed a lot, and he was in like the nightclub scene as a musician. Doesn't seem like a good place for a gospel song to be written, right? But in all of what he was doing, you know, earlier in his life, he had been a musician all growing up. From the time he was like 10 years old on, he actually appeared on a lot of radio programs. He had a TV show at one point in the like 1940s. Called Ray's Roundup. He had people like Gene Autry and Hank Williams Sr. on it, and so like he got to beat a lot of people. He was very involved in the music scene, country music, but then after a while, he got tired of that and started going into the nightclub type life and was a musician for many years in that field. Well, at one point, he said, you know, I've made all these songs and I make music a lot, for a lot of different things. I bet I could write a really good religious song. And he's like, I don't really know anything about the Bible, anything about Jesus, but I'm going to open it up and I'm going to start reading and I'm going to write a song. And so he opened up his Bible and started reading. He didn't know hardly anything about the Bible at that point. And you know, the verses that he started reading were the exact verses that Asher read for us just a few minutes ago. Just this whole thing where when Peter swings his sword and hits the ear of the boy, Jesus said, put your sword up because don't you know I could call 12 legions of angels if I wanted to. Now, Ray had no idea what that meant when he read that, and he didn't know what 12 legions meant. Probably, there's actually some figures there. Might have been up to 72,000. Like, that's a lot. But that probably would not sounded as good as a song, And so what he said is 10,000 sounded about right. And I bet if I write a song called He Could Have Called 10,000 Angels, then I bet that song would be pretty good. And that's what he did. He set out to write a song using that as the title. And as the story goes, he progressed. He wrote the first verse. And after he wrote the first verse, he said he ended up going to the nightclub where he was employed, and he put in his notice. He was like, I can't work here anymore. He started walking away from that lifestyle. And at some point, what he says happened is after writing the song and getting it published, he actually started listening to the words that he had wrote down. And that changed him. That got him out of the life he was living, and he completely turned his life around because of this song that he wrote, which is a very interesting place for this to come from. But if you look through the words of this song, do you think that they're pretty scripturally valid? I mean, we sing it a lot. I hope that we agree that it's scripturally valid. But I think there's a lot said here in these verses of this song that can help us even as we contemplate this. So let's look at this song together, and let's read through some of the lyrics. We're going to sing it here in a second. But I want us to really put ourselves in the place of the people around Jesus, seeing what he was experiencing on this cross. There's a lot to be said about that. So let's read through these lyrics. Verse 1, they bound the hands of Jesus in the garden where he prayed. They led him through the streets in shame. They spat upon the Savior, so pure and free from sin. They said, crucify him, he's to blame. I mean, you are walking through this scenario, and hopefully you got this scene in your head of Jesus in the garden. He is praying there, and then they come and arrest him like a common criminal. And they lead him through. There's a whole parade through the streets, and people see Jesus taken into custody. They spat on him. He was pure and free from sin. But they call out for him to be crucified. Jesus obviously did not deserve any of this treatment that he was receiving. But that's what he went through for us. Look at verse 2. Upon his precious head they placed a crown of thorns. They laughed and said, "Behold the king!" They struck him and they cursed him and mocked his holy name. All alone he suffered everything. You think about Jesus, and being the king, he deserved a crown. But you remember what kind of crown that they put on his head, right? The crown of thorns. And now when they say it was the crown of thorns, probably what they were talking about, the most common thorn that they would have around there is from the acacia tree. And those thorns are real big. I mean, it's not just tiny, they're huge. And he wore that on his head, which is kind of fitting if you think about it. Do you know the first place in the Bible where you read about thorns? It's in the Garden of Eden, when the ground was cursed because of sin. Now, Jesus is wearing that curse on his head as a sign of that, connecting to that for us. And not only did they put it on his head, it said that they struck him and they cursed him. Remember, they took a reed, and even though it would have been really painful just alone to put a crown of thorns on his head, they hit him on top of the head with a reed just to drive those thorns a little deeper and to make him feel even a little bit more pain in this. They mocked his holy name. All alone he suffered everything. Just seeing all that suffering that Jesus experienced. We can't even connect to that. In verse 3, when they nailed him to the cross, his mother stood nearby. He said, "Woman, behold thy son." He cried, "I thirst for water," but they gave him none to drink. Then the sinful work of man was done. There's not much that Jesus says from the cross. He said a few things. But there's this one scenario when it's in John 19 where he's on the cross and he looks at his mother. And it says that the disciple whom he loved, it was John, the disciple, was standing nearby. He said to his mother, "Behold your son." And he said to John, "Behold your mother." And he was actually on the cross, he was thinking about his mother who he was leaving behind physically and providing a way for her to be provided for. He said, "John, take care of her." And that was just really amazing that Jesus could even think about that at that moment. He cared so deeply about others. And another thing he said from the cross, "I thirst." Remember that? And so he wanted water to drink. But when they gave him something to drink, it wasn't water. It was like vinegar type stuff. And it was nasty. And that wasn't good. On top of all of that suffering, that just goes a step further. Then the sinful work of man was done. Why was Jesus on the cross? Because of our sin. And in a real sense, the sin of the people there who were putting him on the cross to kill him in a real unlawful way. But ultimately, it was our sin that he took on himself. And that's why he was there in the first place. In verse 4, to the howling mob he yielded. He did not for mercy cry. The cross of shame he took alone. And when he cried, "It's finished," he gave himself to die. Salvation's wondrous plan was done. So all of this that was going on around him, Jesus was able to not cry for mercy, not say, "Oh, you need to get me down from here." He knew what he needed to do, and he took that punishment for us. And the last thing that he cried from the cross, "It is finished." And it was at that moment, he says he gave up his spirit. And he died there on the cross. For us, for our sin, the punishment that we deserved, he took on himself. And he died in our place. And I really love the way verse 4 ends. Salvation's wondrous plan was done. How long had that plan been in motion? Ever since the creation of the world, really. Genesis 3, what we referred to a minute ago with the curse, this was the plan, the culmination of the plan. Everything that happened up to this point was leading to this exact moment when Jesus was to die for us. Because we know that we can't do anything on our own to rid the sin from our life. It's not up to us. We can't do that. But the plan of God from long before was that Jesus was going to suffer all of these terrible things, that he was going to experience this pain and this anguish, let alone not even mentioning the weight of our sin that he was experiencing on the cross as well. Just going through all of this pain and struggling in order for us to be saved. That is such an amazing thought, and I hope one that we think about a lot, and that kind of makes us a little nervous, and it makes us feel rough. How could Jesus do this for me? Because the chorus of this song, I think that this is the major point, major turning point that we see this. He could have called 10,000 angels. He could have called many more than that. 10,000 would have done it. Honestly, one angel would have done it. He could have been delivered. He could have called 10,000 angels to destroy the world and set him free. He could have called 10,000 angels, but he died alone for you and me. He took that pain, that suffering that we deserve. There's no way that he, the Son of God, should have been there on that cross. He didn't deserve any of that. But he did that for us, for our benefit, for you individually, for me. He took my pain, my suffering, the weight of my sin to deliver the world, to set us free. And there's no greater way we could say that. The story of Jesus is a really remarkable one. And we can see how a song like this can lead you to Christ. This is a song that has a lot of powerful words, powerful meaning, and if we're really considering this and thinking about it, I think it turns us to the cross and it shows us what Jesus did. So we're going to sing this song together, all 4 verses right now. So let's get ready for it.